Hello and welcome to this second video on all things about Spatial SQL. Today we're going to be talking about getting started and which tools you need to actually run your database or data warehouse. Now effectively you need three things to start using Spatial SQL. You need your database or your data warehouse. You're going to need some method to access or run commands to that database. And then the third thing is you're going to need something to visualize your data. We're going to talk about all three parts and how you can kind of create a setup that'll work for you to start running Spatial SQL queries. So there's really two choices about where you can store and query your data. There's a database system and a data warehouse. Effectively, they work in very similar ways. The main differences are in terms of how the data is stored and queried and where it's run. Let's start with a database which you stand up and has a dedicated amount of computing power and storage power. Let's say you give that database 100 gigabytes of storage and 8 CPUs. That's what it's going to have to run with, and it will have that every time. That database needs to be active and running every time you want to use it, but effectively it runs around the clock. A data warehouse, on the other hand, actually allows you to store data in a very cheap way, kind of like keeping it in a warehouse. And when you query it, it effectively charges you for the compute power that you use. The difference is that it can parallelize the query. It means it can run different parts of that in parallel, which actually will speed up the operation. Now, if your data is really, really large and complex, or particularly has a lot of rows, a good option might be a data warehouse. Otherwise, a database is a pretty good choice to get started. But depending on what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, there's different advantages to those. I have a link to a blog post here that you can actually check out that talks about the differences and why you may or may not want to consider a database or a data warehouse. So let's start with the databases. The most popular database for spatial data is PostGIS. PostGIS isn't actually a database itself. It's an extension of PostgreSQL, which is an open source version of a SQL database. There's a few ways to actually install PostGIS with PostgreSQL. You can pull the source code and start running it yourself. Another good option is using cloud provided services like Google Cloud Platform or Amazon Web Services that actually have these stood up for you and you can start running them. If you're looking to get started right away and with no cost, there's two options I really like. If you're using a Mac, a great choice for this is actually using Postgres app. This actually is just an app you can download from the web, actually start using and put data into right away. It's very simple and easy to set up, literally like downloading any other app on your computer, and there's a video here that shows you exactly how to get started to do that. The other option is using Docker. Now Docker is really great because it's a containerized deployment service. Effectively what that means is that every container is a blank slate. It knows nothing about what's on there compared to your computer, which has all these different languages and tools stored in it. Anyone with Docker installed, once again, as simple as downloading an application onto your computer, can actually run and install PostGIS from a Docker container. There's a post in the description and the links below that actually shows you how to get started and do this. If you're not familiar with the command line, this might be a little overwhelming, but if you walk through the steps, it's actually pretty simple to start, and it actually shows you how to connect it to QGIS at the end. Now, your other option for getting started is your data warehouse. The four most popular right now that support spatial processes are Amazon Redshift, Google BigQuery, Snowflake, and Databricks. These are four popular services. Of course, all of them have some cost associated with them, but many of them have a free tier that you can get started with too. Now, there's slight differences and variations in the data warehouses. Some support some functions, others don't. You'll have to take a look and see what makes the most sense for you, but these are also really good options to start right away. A lot of them also have data preloaded into the data warehouse for you actually get started with, so you actually have something to start with without any data to import from the beginning. Another cool option is looking at Apache Sedona. This is formerly known as GeoSpark, a extension for geospatial for the Spark ecosystem. This may be more of an advanced option, but it's completely open source and ready for you to use. So now you've picked your data warehouse and your database. How do you actually run queries or actually access the data in the database? There's a lot of different options, from using the command line, which all these different tools support, and using query interfaces to do this too. If you want to use the command line, that's great, but if you want to see the data in a visual or tabular format, I definitely look at a query user interface. dbeaver is a really great one that connects to pretty much all of these different tools. You can actually write queries, manage your data, and see everything in that interface. Now, all the data warehouses I mentioned actually have a web UI attached to them, so you can actually write queries right away and actually see your data returned. So it's a pretty easy way to start writing queries and run from the beginning. The other option I really like is actually connecting QGIS to your database or your data warehouse. This allows you not only to connect, write queries, but also see your data in a visual format in a desktop UI. So if this is your your first time getting started with anything technical or SQL database, this is probably your best option. I have a video here that shows you how to set it up from the beginning, so you can take a look and see how to do that. The other added bonus of using QGIS is you can actually import data into a PostGIS database right from the UI. So it really handles just about every step you might want to run. The other options I'll mention is using Python. There's lots of Python APIs to access these databases, such as GeoPandas, that actually has native implementations for PostGIS. Another one that's very popular for Postgres is called pgadmin. It's been traditionally used for administrative tasks in PostGIS and Postgres, but you can certainly use it to query and access your data too. Now, moving on to the last step, which is sort of an extra added challenge for geospatial data. Because you can't exactly tell what's going on every time in tabular format, you generally want to see a map attached to your geospatial data. This is something that you'll also have to do, is set up a way to visualize that data. I already mentioned one with QGIS. If you connect your database or data warehouse to QGIS, you can certainly pull the data, see it, and show it on a map. And then once you have your data loaded in QGIS, you can style it, create maps, and do whatever else you need to with. Other tools like Tableau that have this business intelligence interface are certainly things you can connect your data to. The mapping capabilities are somewhat limited. You can only show a certain amount of features or polygons, so keep that in mind. But if you have access to it and your organization uses it, this might be a good way to get started too. I would say one of the most popular options is actually using Jupyter Notebooks and Python to actually query your data and then show it in a map or visualization. Now, once you have that data in a geospatially acceptable format for those tools like a GeoData Frame, there's a lot to choose from. You could use Folium, you could use LeafMap, you can use Kepler within the Jupyter Notebook environment, you could use PyDeck. There's lots of different choices there, or you can just create a simple image map within the notebook itself too. The last option I'll mention is Carto. Now, I do work for Carto, so I just want to have full transparency here, but it is a great tool for you to actually connect your databases or data warehouses to, and then query them and visualize the data in a user interface. I use it all day, so I'm pretty used to it, of course, but this is another option for you to check out. If you're a student, you can actually get free access. Take a look at the links below, or if you want to sign up for a trial, you can get started there too. So that's it for today. There's a very easy way to set up your database, query your data through an access method, and then visualize your data. In our next video, we'll talk about importing data into your database or data warehouse. So we'll see you then.